Okay, I don't know why it made an announcement this time, but not last time.
That never happened to be like every time the teacher recorded Zooms.
Does it?
No, it never happened before where it give me
Oh,
an
okay. I
announcement.
was gonna say, I don't know. I don't know what's so special.
Yeah, no, I don't see the actual assignment.
So you should be able to see something like this under the content. And notice this is what we'll typically see. You'll see the Zoom invitation. You'll see some information about whatever notes are posted. I've had some people who have printed out the notes ahead of time so that they can, you know, make their own notes over them. I've had some students who have just kept their notes on their whatever they're using, their laptop or their phone or their computer screen or their, excuse me, their tablet screen, and then they've edited right over them. But I would suggest that at some point, look at the notes. If you miss class, review the recording and read the book, because I think if you do those three things, you'll find that probably the answer to about 95% of the questions on the exams or on the smaller questions, assignments, are probably either in the book or the lecture that we did or the notes. Keep in mind that none of the three of those are exactly the same. So, you know, don't get super obsessed and think that if you do one, you don't have to do the other two. When we go over the notes, I usually don't cover every item. I think I would feel kind of like Vanna White if I did that. So we usually cover the main points, but not everything. So keep that in mind. I'm going to switch and go back to the screen we were looking at before. Oops, I think I got the wrong one.
What is it? I'm losing it.
So there is a coupon at the end of the syllabus that you can use to avoid a penalty on late assignments. Keep in mind that when we look at this, there are a couple of themes that we're going to see throughout the class. When we look at living things have to do two main things. And really one main thing, if you want to get picky. Living things need to reproduce. Living things have an incredible drive to reproduce. You can see this with people when we look at all the different techniques that people use to reproduce when maybe they can't reproduce naturally. All the different forms of fertility treatment that we have. You could even think of something like adoption as being a form of reproduction. So there are a lot of different things that organisms do. Now, living organisms have a problem with reproduction though. The problem is there are no living organisms that can reproduce as soon as they're born, or I don't know if we want to use the word born for them all, but as soon as they're produced. So to reproduce, living organisms have to do something else. They have to survive. The living organisms that we know about that can reproduce the most quickly are a lot of different types of bacteria. There are many bacteria that can reproduce 20 minutes after they're produced. So what this means is if you look at one bacteria cell, after 20 minutes, you could have 2 of those. And after 40 minutes, 4. And after 80 minutes, 8. This might not seem like a lot since we're only talking about 8 cells after an hour. But if they keep dividing at this rate, at the end of one day, there could be more than 8 million of these bacteria cells just from one single cell. So living organisms typically have a great capacity to reproduce, but the problem, even for bacteria, is they can't reproduce until 20 minutes after they were made. So this means they've got to survive for 20 minutes. Now, you know, from our perspective, 20 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but most bacteria don't survive 20 minutes. Most of them die before 20 minutes are up. Either you wipe up the counter with an antibacterial disinfectant like Clorox, or something else happens to them. They get eaten by another bacteria or something else a little bit bigger than them. Now, when we look at all the characteristics of living things, one characteristic stands out. Molecularly, there's one molecule that controls everything related to reproduction and survival, a molecule called DNA. So we will spend a lot of the time this semester focusing on how DNA works. And really the most basic way to think about DNA is a set of instructions that tells a cell how to make proteins. Now, we'll talk about proteins quite a bit too, but to get a little bit of background, proteins are made of amino acids. And if we would look at all the proteins in your body, there are 20 different amino acids. So in a way, amino acids are a lot like letters in the English alphabet. There are 26 letters in our alphabet. But with 26 letters, we can make a lot of different words. Well, with 20 amino acids, we can make a lot of different proteins. And if you think about all the words there are in the English language with 26 letters, I don't know how big the average word is, but in the human body, the average protein is over 100 amino acids long. So imagine if the average word was over 100 letters long. Think of all the different words you could make. So there are lots of different proteins, millions and millions of different proteins. And when we look at proteins, proteins are what give you, but not just you, but the bacteria that we were talking about a minute ago, and oak trees and mushrooms and anything we're looking at. Proteins give cells and organisms their characteristics. The reason you have blue eyes, or brown eyes, or green eyes, or whatever color your eyes are, is because of proteins that are made in the iris of your eye. The reason that you have type A blood or type B blood or type O blood is because of proteins that are made in your red blood cells. The reason that you're A positive or A negative is because of other proteins that are made in your red blood cells. The reason that you have sickle cell anemia or the sickle cell trait or just normal hemoglobin, that's because of another protein that's made in the red blood cells. So biologically, we can trace your characteristics back to the proteins, and then we can trace them back even further than the proteins to the DNA. Now notice, for people and for some other living organisms as well, there is another factor. The way you are today isn't completely determined by your biology. There's also social effects, the type of environment that you're brought up in, things like that. And we might think of social environment as something that only affects people, but we actually have pretty good evidence that it affects other organisms as well, especially other mammals. But notice even things that we might think of that are completely due to your upbringing have a lot of biology in them. A study done a few years ago looked at personality traits, whether you're introverted or outgoing, whether you're aggressive or passive, things like that. And we might consider personality traits to be social, right? Except this study showed that actually about 50% of your personality is determined by genetics, not by, your social environment. which is good news for parents because it means if your kids are crazy, you're only responsible for half that craziness. You know, well, maybe all of it if you created their environment too, I guess, but biologically, you're not responsible for all of it. So we want to think about DNA and proteins whenever we're talking about anything. And I won't let you forget about them very much. So we'll be keeping those in mind. Now, there's one more thing that we really have to focus on. And this is the fact that when we look at different types of organisms, different types of living organisms survive and reproduce differently. I guess it's human nature, but we tend to think that all living things work similar to how we do. So we tend to think that if this is what humans do, this is what everything does. That's not true. I told you that I studied a lot of different living organisms. So let's think a little bit about a beehive. Does anybody know how many chromosomes a human cell has? If we look at you, the DNA is organized into
Is it 23?
Okay, 23 pairs will be a little bit specific, but yeah, 23 pairs, good. And when a male makes a sperm, that sperm gets one from each pair. So when I make a sperm, our chromosomes are actually numbered from the biggest to the smallest. My sperm cell gets one copy of chromosome number 1, maybe the one I got from my mom, maybe the one I inherited from my dad. It's completely random, like a coin toss. My sperm cell gets one copy of chromosome number 2, maybe the one I got from my mom, maybe the one I got from my dad, all the way down to the last set of chromosomes, the last pair. And the same thing happens when a woman makes an egg. So this means that when we look at a child gets just as much DNA, just as much genetic material from their mother as they do from their father. However, if we look at bees, males, I guess we don't call them men, but male bees are actually created from eggs that aren't fertilized. Now, in a person, an egg that isn't fertilized doesn't develop. But in bees, they develop and they develop into a male. So a male only has half as many chromosomes as a female does. And because of the fact that males only have half as many chromosomes as a female, this leads to kind of the unusual arrangement that we see in beehives, also in anthills. The same thing is true. If we look at a person, remember, living organisms, their main purpose in life, now this could be changed by human culture, but biologically, the main purpose for living things is to reproduce, to pass your DNA down to the next generation. Well, one way to do that is to have children. But because males only have half as many chromosomes as a female, if you were a bee, and if you were a bee, you would probably be a female. When we look at a beehive, all the bees in it are females. There are no males. If you look at a beehive, the reason that it's all females is because females are more closely related to each other genetically than they are to their own daughters. So for a bee, if you want to pass down as much DNA to the next generation as possible, if you want to be efficient about this, what's the best way to do this? Help your mom have more sisters. Because when your mom produces a sister, that sister has 50% more of your DNA than your own daughter does. So because of this, bees and ants have an unusual social arrangement. Now, another way to think about this, again, considering bees and ants, remember I told you I'm into insect reproduction. If we look at people, there's evidence that after sexual intercourse in people, a sperm cell can survive up to about maybe 3 days inside the female reproductive system. It's not clear if it's very efficient at fertilizing eggs for all those time, but a sperm cell can at least survive for about 3 days. Now, when a female bee or ant mates, they actually mate several times, typically within a short period, 24 hours, but then they can save the sperm for 20 or 30 years. And they can basically release this sperm, one sperm cell at a time, to fertilize an egg when they lay an egg. Now, if they release the sperm cell and it fertilizes an egg, that becomes a female. If they don't release the sperm cell, it becomes a male. And males are usually only produced by beehives or anthills when they are making more queens to spread out and start a new colony, because otherwise males are useless. They just provide sperm for the girls. So we might think everything survives like people, but bees and ants and how they reproduce are actually a good example of something that doesn't. And you might say, yeah, that's just bees and ants, but guess what? There are more ants in the world than there are people. There are more bees in the world than there are people. So you can argue about the fact that, well, yes, but we're the dominant species. Well, that's true, but at the same time, one way of thinking about, different species, how successful they are, is how many individuals are in their population. And there are a lot of bees and ants out there. There aren't that many people, comparatively speaking. We're going to stop here for today. Today is relatively short. Tomorrow we will have a longer class, so probably be prepared to be here till close to noon. But in the meantime, I will send you another invitation for class tomorrow, and try to at least download the assignment and see if you're able to type your answers in. You don't have to submit it. It's not due till Wednesday, but at least look at it so that if you're going to have some problems, we can find out early, and then we can make arrangements tomorrow to meet and see if we can figure out a way to figure out what's going on and correct the problem.
So about the no-call assignment,
Mhm.
what's the questions? What are we supposed to do? Because
Well, the questions are on the note card, but they're also further up here. So they're
What do you
on,
mean they're on the note card?
they're
I
on the
can't
first
see it.
page of this set of notes, but they're also written down on the note card.
Yeah, I can see that. But like you said, they're written down on a note card. What do you mean?
So what you're going to do is you're going to type in your answers for the note card. So you're going to type in, my name is Andre. And I said, if you think you're going to use a different name, if you send me emails, if you usually go by Andy, you're going to say, but most of my emails will say Andy or something like that, just so that I know what to look for. And then after you get everything done, save that document. I would suggest that you save as and give it a slightly different name, maybe say introductory note card answers or something like that. Doesn't have to be very clever. And then send that back through D2L. So go on to our home web page and you should be able to submit that.
Okay, so basically just answer all the questions in the Microsoft Word document and then submit it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other questions about how to do that? And like I say, I would recommend kind of play with it a little bit today, see if you have any problems, and if you do, we can either talk about them in class, or if you want to, we can you and I can meet before class or after class, not just Andre, but anybody, and we'll see if we can figure out what's going on.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So in the assignment little page or whatever, it says comments. So can we write like the answers in the comment section?
Well, it would be better to do them on the document, because later we're going to have some really long assignments and you're going to have to do a lot of scrolling back and forth from the question to the comments. And the other problem is then when I get your comments, if I send you corrections, you won't have the questions right by your answers. So I'm not sure that the corrections will make much sense without the questions with them. So I would say, see if you can resubmit the assignment with the answers.
Okay.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I know in the past, most students have been able to do that. So I'm guessing it will work. Any other questions? Okay, if not, I will see you tomorrow. And as they used to tell you in second grade, have a good breakfast so you have some fuel for your brain. And we'll plan on meeting for a longer time period tomorrow. So enjoy the rest of the day, although it doesn't look like it's going to be a sunny outdoors day, but oh well, that's the problem with Chicago.
Okay, have a good day.
You too.